It's time for some inspiration. I'd like to invite Carol Theo to the podium, and she will introduce our speaker.
Anyway, thank you and Merry Christmas and God bless you all. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, who happens to be my pastor, Kevin O'Connor from the ARC, Redlands Church of the Nazarene. He's one of the most unique men of the cloth that I have ever worked with or have had as my pastor. He has been lead pastor at the ARC now for 7 years. Pastor Kevin entered Bible college at the age of 17 in Colorado Springs, Colorado. He has been preaching and teaching for 34 plus years. Pastor has been a radio guest Bible commentator, has co-authored Healthy Relationships with God and Others, and will have a new book coming out in 2018 entitled All-Knowing, the Omniscient God. Throughout college, Pastor worked at a supermarket and at a hospital in the X-ray department. He had some great training because when he was 5 years old, he went to work at an Italian deli and he bagged potatoes to help supplement his family's income. Pastor was part of a family with 9 people, and his mother was a single mom. It was very difficult. So God has been gracious and kind to our pastor. As an avid reader, one of Pastor's favorite subjects is history, but for the past 45 years and continuing, the Holy Bible is the one book he reveres most of all. Pastor Kevin is married to his lovely wife, Mindy. They have 2 grown sons. The oldest son is lead pastor in a in Church of the Nazarene in Independence, Missouri. They also have a daughter and 5 grandchildren. Their life is full. Pastor Kevin's message this evening is entitled How to Heal a Broken Culture Through Biblical Correctness. Please join me in welcoming my pastor, Kevin O'Connor.
She does such a good job. She's the best person you can have to work with when you're working with so many different people from so many different backgrounds. Thank you, Carol. Hey, tonight as we look at all the different things, and I'm so excited that you guys are becoming more and more of an activist type group instead of just thinking about things. You're willing to get out there and say, we got to do something. And I want to give you another ingredient that I believe that's going to help you to make a major difference. When we talk about healing a broken culture, the reality is all cultures since the garden was a broken culture. Now, in the garden was the only perfect culture that we've ever had. But from the time, now think about this, when you think about culture, how society says what is the excellence, how should we live, we only had one law in the garden and we couldn't keep the one law. And so that culture, they got kicked out of the garden. Ever since we've been dealing with a downward spiral. But tonight I want to talk to you about how you can see a major difference by not only connecting with the right kind of initiatives, the right kind of people, and understanding the issues, but when we connect with God, you have the winning ingredient on your side. I'm convinced God and country go hand in hand. Amen? So here's the question. Who determines what is truth? Who out there makes that decision for you and makes that decision for me? Who determines what is moral? Who determines what is just? Or what is justice? Who determines what is good? Who determines what is evil? Someone has to make those determinations for the culture to work in a proper way. Now, in reality, no matter where you live in the world, there's only 3 absolutes. As a matter of fact, let me give it to you here. Here's the 3 absolutes that will determine your ruling or your law within your culture. The first, we just call it very simply, the natural law. The natural law is simply this. It's a self-evident law. I think our founding fathers knew about that law, don't you? A belief system in a all-powerful law. This is so important. We know that that law is connected with the supreme being who is omnipotent, all-powerful, all-knowing, and he's everywhere. And this is the foundation that keeps most civilizations, most societies, and cultures in an even balance, because God's still working with human beings. So no culture is going to be perfect, but when you have this first one in line, you're in good shape. But the second law comes into play in many nations, many societies, and many people groups. You know it as a dictator, or the dictatorship law, and it's the person at the top, or the people at the top, determine what's right for the masses. And you can see on the screen that I put up there that this actually is demonstrated through Marxism. It's also the Muslim culture is exactly that. A few at the top determine what's right for the masses. Communism, this is all part of it. As you can see, this means someone at the top can be changing the standard all the time. Now the third is what we call self-governing law. Self-governing law is actually written about in the Bible. If you ever want to read how this works out for a culture or society, you read the book of Judges. It's where everyone did what was right in their own eyes. It didn't turn out good. This is the predominant push within our nation today, the self-governing law. This is very, very dangerous, because then I can say, well, that's truth for you, but that's not truth for me. See, when we remove the natural law, that there is a supreme being that sets up what is law, what is right, what is good, what is evil, then we have standards that we bump up against. But if you have the other two, you're always coming to a moving object. You never know when you're going to hit it, because it's human beings that are setting what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's evil. There's a scripture, and it's actually a prophecy. It's Isaiah 5:20. And it says this: woe to those who call good evil, who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Isaiah said this 722 years before Jesus was going to come into the world. He prophesied that there would be this pull on society and on culture, that people would want to take things and turn it upside down. We really definitely are living that here today, aren't we? So, how did we get there? Especially as I look at the age of everybody here, most of you remember this, that in 1965, we had the average spirituality of a person was an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being you just know everything about the Bible. You went to catechism, you went to Sunday school, you went to church, you know where Genesis is, you know where Revelation is, you know the difference between good and evil, you know that God determines those things. The average person, not the average Christian, the average person in America in 1965 was an 8 on the spirituality scale. They knew that there was a shame element to have sin in your life, that you couldn't just go anywhere morally and make it in society, because people would say, oh, got pregnant out of marriage. Oh, you're living with somebody. And just the society norms would keep everything the way it was supposed to be. It doesn't mean those things didn't happen. It means there was pressure for people to say, we know there is a better way. When Carol did the introduction, she told you about me starting working at 5 years of age on the East Coast of Philadelphia. And Fred LaRosa was a great businessman. He was a Catholic man. That's what I was being raised. If you're living in Philadelphia, you're Irish Catholic and Democrat. Oh. Now, I want you to know that changed very quickly for me, because I realized they do not side with the things of God. You can't find it most of the times that they're not aligning up with the natural law and the things of God. They're always wanting to move the target. We need a party, we need a people that aren't afraid to say that some things don't move. What he did was he hired many of the little kids in the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, I noticed that he hired a lot of the high school kids and the junior high kids to come and do tasks at his store. So I went and asked him for a job as I was starting first grade. And my mom having that many kids, I was starting first grade when I was still 5. I didn't turn 6 till that October in my first grade year. And so he gave me a job of sacking the potatoes. What he did was he understood he had a responsibility for community, for the culture of his neighborhood. And he didn't want the young kids to be out there getting into all the new drugs that were coming out in the 60s and all the different things that were going to start changing our culture in a major way. So as a business owner, he did what? He established he was going to make a difference with his little store. And dozens upon dozens upon dozens of kids through the 40 years that store was open came and learned a good work ethic. They learned how to make an honest dollar. They learned how to make the customers always right. He gave so many great ethics. And he wasn't really a dynamic Christian man in any way. But the Church of the Nazarene that I'm a pastor of was right across the street. And every Sunday he'd say, now, you need to go over there. I said, well, I'm Catholic, but your mother sends you to Vacation Bible School. Go over there. 1965, that's not that long ago. How many remember 1965 like it was yesterday, right? Here we are now, in 2017, this is from my denomination, this statistic here. The average person in America today is a 2 on the spiritual scale. As a matter of fact, it's low for the Christians. Most Christians today are becoming biblically illiterate. They don't know their Bible. In the latest poll done for Christians, it said that 60% of Christians believe everybody's making it to heaven. It's kind of like it's just a free party, do whatever you want. God is love, 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 and everybody will make it to heaven. That's how much we slipped from 1965 to 2017. There are those that as I look at those that are futuristic and do this area where they're projecting out there, they say really in many ways we have pockets within the United States where they are off the scale in the minus realm, where they don't even know that the Bible is a book, that they don't know who Adam and Eve really were real people or that they even exist. It's amazing how far we've gone. So, here's the question. Why biblical correctness? Well, the first reason is it's the oldest source of absolute truth. It's the oldest source. It's been around for 5,000 years. The second is our founding fathers trusted this source. They said we need some absolutes. We need a people again today that aren't afraid of that word, that we have some absolutes. That's why we're coming back, that we're saying Merry Christmas. It's not Happy Holidays, though. Happy Hanukkah is very real. I spoke on that last night. Go on to the Redlands.com and you can see the mysteries behind Hanukkah. It's all part of our society, but it's Christmas because it's Christ's birth, isn't it? And the third reason is this, why biblical correctness? Because God, He reveals He's a God that reveals the future. And He does it in this, that He knows, Isaiah says this again, He knows the end from the beginning. So here's my short little story. I set all that up to give you the Christmas prophet. You know the story of the wise men. When my boys were growing up, my kids always used to say to me, especially my youngest son Chris, he said, Daddy, you going to tell the story about the wise guys again? I said, sure. But it starts 530 some years before Jesus' birth. And this is so important for you to be growing in biblical knowledge because the absolutes there and the hope are there. This young generation is lost because they don't trust absolutes. The Bible is filled with them in things that they won't be able to explain or understand, that if you know these stories and you're sharing them with your kids and your grandkids, you're changing one person at a time, that there are absolutes that leave you in awe. The story starts with the Babylonians coming into Israel, and they take the young people, a group of young teenagers. It's believed that Daniel was 17 years of age when he was taken out of Jerusalem and taken up to Babylon. They took these young guys for a certain reason. You'll know some of their names, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were peers and friends of Daniel. They took these young students because they were good in the sciences, in astronomy and astrology. The Babylonian culture was so much different than what's going to come down the road when you get to the Roman Empire. They want to demolish everything. But the previous cultures from that, from the Babylonians to the Medes and the Persians to the Greek Empire, they wanted to assimilate people and draw the good from that which they've conquered. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar was doing. Now, Nebuchadnezzar didn't trust his advisors around him because they were all his father's advisors. And he felt like they had more power than he did. So he had this dream that God gave him. This is Daniel chapter 2 in a short little 5-minute synopsis of it. Daniel chapter 2, he has a dream. And he says to his advisors, he says, tell me what my dream was and interpret my dream. They said, no, you tell me the dream and then we'll interpret it. He goes, no, I want you to tell me what I dreamt. They go, that's not how it works. Nobody can do that. He said, now he was setting it all up because he wanted to get rid of all these advisors. He said, if you can't tell me what I've dreamed, you all will be executed. Ooh, what a tough job. Now, Daniel and his friends weren't even in the area, in the town, when Nebuchadnezzar puts this decree out, but they're a part of this group that will be executed. Nebuchadnezzar sends the captain of his guard to where Daniel's at, and he tells him, you have a death sentence on you. Everybody that is a part of this advisor area that are in the sciences of astronomy, astrology, soothsaying, the magicians, all those that would come and be advisors to the king, you're all being put to death. And Daniel said, can we ask why? He said, because the king's had a dream and no one can tell him what he's dreamt and what it means. He said, send this petition to the king. Give me one night. Let me go to my God and I'll give you an answer. He gets Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they have an all-night prayer meeting. Wouldn't you pray all night if you thought you were going to die in the morning anyway? And God gives Daniel the interpretation of the dream. And he goes to Nebuchadnezzar and he says, you dreamt about a statue of a man. And it had so many different irons and metals, and gold as a head, and silver as a breastplate, and bronze as a waist, and iron and clay feet, and he describes it all. And he goes, these are all the future empires. The gold represents Babylon. And the future empires are all going to come. Very interesting. Daniel's going to be, remember, he's a teenager. He's going to be promoted because he can interpret that dream. And the king says, there's no man like you in all the land. He said, no, I can't take credit for this. You can't say it. I did this. It's my God that gave me your dream. It's my God that gave you an interpreter. Nebuchadnezzar said, I am putting you this day over all my advisors. Read Daniel chapter 2. You know what they called the advisors? The MAGA. The wise men. So 530 years before Jesus is born, the wise men come under this Hebrew kid, teenager, who's going to be the second in command of the Babylonian Empire. And then when Cyrus comes in and takes over the Babylon captivity and takes over the whole Babylonian Empire and brings in the Medes and the Persians, he becomes number 2 of that empire as a teenager that knew his science, but he had a connection with God. That leads us to the story How then did the wise men get there 530 some years later when Jesus was born? Well, wise men still seek him today, don't they? All right. Now you know the background. He was put in charge of these men, and to teach them, he knew certain things within the scriptures. As a matter of fact, let me tell you one little thing that I believe that's happening today, that I don't know how many of you are attending church regularly or in a church that teaches how prophecy is being fulfilled. But since 1948, a nation that was dispersed in 70 AD has come back. It got its capital in 67, and just last week the United States finally said we're mustering up the gumption to move the embassy from Tel Aviv down to Jerusalem. And many Christian scholars believe that God ordained Trump to become president, because you know the other party wasn't going to do any of that. And God has been setting up the end times, because as you read Isaiah, you will see that Jerusalem becomes the focus of the world in the last days. And Trump just put Jerusalem as the focus of the world. Pretty cool. So you're living and seeing prophecy all from 1948 all the way to here. All this is coming to pass. So what was it that Daniel knew that he could send to these men, every generation passing down this kind of information? He knew how to read the stars, the astronomy. He was good in the sciences. Do you know what he saw? He saw the star that you saw in the little video that you had earlier up there. He saw a star. This is what the Bethlehem star is when you see it in the sky. The planet on the top is Jupiter. The planet on the bottom is Venus. Every year they're both in the sky somewhere in proximity to each other, some portion of the year. But over 2,000 years ago, they came less than 1% apart in their rotation around the sun. And for 2 years, they traveled like that together as wise men from the east, from Babylon, who had been passed down generation to generation, that when you see the king's star, you know that the king has been born. They also, you know the constellations, the ones called Virgo. That's the woman, the virgin. She had the moon was rising and it was in her belly. They said when you see the moon in the constellation of Virgo, the virgin is pregnant. And when you see the king's star, go find the king and bring these gifts to him. For 500 years, that's the story that was passed down. Why Jupiter and Venus? Jupiter is the king planet in our solar system. Venus is the love planet. The king of love put a star together so that the wise men who still seek him, for over 530 years, they heard the stories. They looked for the signs in the sky, and they followed it to get to Jerusalem when they asked King Herod, so where is this one born king? The religious leaders all knew. They said, well, the Bible says, the Old Testament Bible says Bethlehem. And they went to Bethlehem. There they found the baby Jesus. Here's what's really interesting. This last picture, this is in closing. In this last picture up here, you're seeing, this is a report from 2015, June 30th and July 1st. CNN, which fake news, but they got this one right. NBC, ABC, Fox News said for the first time in over 2,000 years, Jupiter and Venus are at 1/3% apart, and it's the Bethlehem star that hasn't been here since 2 BC. Israel's a nation. Its capital is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the center of it all. God said in science, as Jesus said, I'll show you signs in the sun, moon, and stars. 2 years ago, we were with our son up in Turlock. We were heading to Alaska on a cruise, and we were swimming in a pool that night, and we stopped and we said, there it is. And we pointed it out, the Bethlehem star. The following summer of 2016, 2 years in a row, just like it happened when Jesus was here the first time, the Bethlehem stars come back. What does that mean? I have no idea. But I know this. it means God's still talking. And he's looking for people that want to be radical for him, that believe in the absolutes and natural laws, and that will muster up an energy and do something instead of just talk about it, and change the world back to the way it's supposed to be, where culture at least has a chance, where there's natural laws set by God that are the standard that no one's supposed to go against. Now, last week on Thursday night, in Kansas City, Missouri, you know the young Attorney General there in Missouri. His name is David Joshua Hawley, Hawley, 37 years of age, Attorney General for the state of Missouri. He's running for the Senate, the United States Senate here in 2018 as one of the youngest guys that's going to run for the Senate. He drew together 800 clergies, all under 45 years of age in the state of Missouri. He said, it's time the church and the government get together and get this right. We need the influencers out there to do something. Let me tell you, you're running for Senate, do that. Get hold of the clergy. You can get hold of my age group too, but if we're not going after the young clergies that are telling these kind of stories, that our God still does these kind of miraculous things, and the signs are here today, you will not motivate people. And we need the young people more than the Democrats do. You need to get the clergy on your side, the young clergy, get these messages out, and let's change America and make it great for God also again. Thank you.